Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're going to be talking about new NFL data and why these metrics matter. And specifically what we're going to be talking about is, I went into the offensive and defensive split data, and I had done a project like this a while ago where I had turnover percentage and I had offensive score percentage. But then it just dawned on me, if I'm really going to be doing a project like this for this season in terms of, taking statistics and trying to predict outcomes based on statistics, that I should test all the statistics. I should go through every single NFL stat, test it, see what matters, and whatever matters the most, put that into projections. Highlight that stuff 100% because there's a lot of data. There's a lot of variables that you have to consider when you're trying to project anything in life. And I think that based on the work that I've done in the last couple weeks, I wanted to add these sort of variables, and I wanted to discuss or at least talk about these variables in depth. That way, I have a video of reference so that if anybody asks about this or wants to know more about it or specifically what these things matter and what doesn't matter, that I would go through all this stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about, or at least what I'm going to be talking about, is other NFL data, the data that I'm going to be adding to the data that I'm already doing or that I've already talked about in previous videos, explain why I'm adding these variables, and then also go into some other variables as to why I'm not using those variables. Because I know I'm going to get some people asking, well, why don't you add this? Why don't you add that? Explain why I'm not going to use some of these variables. So starting with the basic stuff, and all the terms are going to be in the description. So I know some of you guys may look at some of the charts I'm putting up and go, what's that? What's this? What's that? And I'll do my best to explain it. But I am going to put all the terms and definitions because I'm going to have a lot of terms and definitions in this video. It's just going to happen. So just go there if you get lost at any point. And I've tried to dumb down some of my stuff as well. Not because I think you guys are dumb, but just to make it easier to understand at least where I'm coming from when it comes to these sort of things. So starting with the offensive data specifically. When it comes to offenses, teams that typically win 12 to 16 wins or more a season from 1998 to 2016 do well when it comes to offensive split first down conversion rate, which is, of course, something I've talked about a ton in previous videos. And, of course, all my matchup videos that I've done this week all pertain to offensive split first down conversion data. And those have correlations to winning more football games. The better you do when it comes to offensive split first down conversion rates, the more football games you win. By the same token, turnover percentage also correlates to winning more football games. The less turnovers you have as an offense based on percentages, the more football games you're going to win. And again, this is basically the averages for teams that win 12 to 16 wins, 9 to 11 wins or more, 8 wins or more, and then 7 wins or less. And as you can clearly see, if you have a bad turnover percentage, if you have bad offensive split first down conversion rate, you're not going to be winning a lot of football games if you keep up these percentages. And that's what the basis of my future matchup videos is going to be around, this kind of stuff. Sack prevention as well. The less sacks a quarterback takes, the more wins you have. And from a statistical basis, it's been proven from 1998 to 2016. So the less sacks you get, the more wins you're going to have. And then, of course, offensive score percentage, which this is just basic stuff. Like, I don't mean to sound like it shouldn't be this simple, but like the highest correlation to success when it comes to offense and winning football games is the offensive score percentage, which is essentially how many times does the offensive drive equal points, which is basically how many points you're putting up. Because the more points you put up, the more football games you're going to win. Which it's just common sense. In a game like football, the more points you put up, the more games you're going to win. And that's what that is as well. Offensive score percentage has correlated very heavily to winning football games. And I figured I just have to add it because it just makes sense. It just makes sense to add this for projection. Then we get to the defensive data. This is the same thing as the offensive data. It's just it's the opposite. So defensive split first down conversion rate. So this is about the defenses preventing first downs from being made. The defenses that do this better than everybody else typically win more games. Offensive score prevention percentage. So this is just like the offensive score percentage, but it's the prevention of offensive scoring. You win more football games typically on average. You know, the teams that win 12 to 16 wins typically do really well when it comes to offensive score prevention. 9 to 11 wins, 8 or more wins, and of course the teams that only win 7 wins or less typically don't do so well in terms of the averages. Defensive turnovers. The more turnovers you create as a defense equals more wins. The more sacks you get from a percentage standpoint, the more wins you get. And interception percentage is actually higher than sack percentage. So interception percentage is more important than sacks. You know, I'll still pay attention to sacks. I'll still, when I'm doing my previews, I'll talk about sacks because I think sacks can have significant impacts. When I do some more videos, when the Super Bowl comes around, I'll be doing more videos about how teams that have really high sack percentage, like the Giants and like those sort of teams, typically do well. Like they just match up really well with these high-powered offenses if they can get the quarterback, really well. But I won't go too much into that. But this is basic defensive stuff. So defenses that are good when it comes to defensive splits, offensive score prevention, defensive turnovers. The more turnovers they create as a defense, the more sacks they get as a defense, the more interceptions they get as a defense, which pretty much ties in with turnovers on defense, the more wins you typically have. Then we get into something that I think is a little bit more, people don't talk about it often, special teams, right? Special teams. So I went and I looked at all the special teams data in terms of field goal percentage, extra point percentage. So, what's your percentage when it comes to converting extra points? Punting average, for example, as well. Field goals that are 51 to 49 area. Field goals that are 50 plus. Yards, Y/R is yards per return when it comes to punt returns. Y/K is yards per kick return. PTD percentage is the percentage of times that punts lead to touchdowns. So basically your ability to score on punt returns. KTD is your ability to score on kick returns. And then DYR and DYK and DPTD percentage and DKTD, and the terms are in the description. So, but the D in front of these is the defensive side. So the defense's ability to prevent yards per return, the defense's ability to prevent yards per kick return, the defense's ability to prevent touchdowns from being made on punt returns and touchdowns from being made in terms of kick returns. There are correlations to special teams data. I mean, as you can clearly see, and I have all the data up right here in front of you, so you can go through all of it. But there are certain things that are just not that correlative. Punting average is really not that correlative. When you look at teams that win 7 wins or less, they're about average. The teams that win 12 to 16 wins or more are typically about average when it comes to punt average. So it's really not correlative. So I'm really not going to be focusing on punt average because it really just doesn't correlate to wins. 50 to 49 yard field goals. That stuff's great, and this would be something to kind of, and of course 50 plus kick, field goal percent, the ability to make 50 yarders field goal wise is good. Like there's a correlation, slight correlation to winning more football games, but it's not as big of a percentage as just the regular old field goal percentage. So I'm really not going to be focusing on 40 to 49 yard field goals or 50 plus field goal stuff. Like I'm just not going to include that in any of my data because the field goal percentage by itself is better than the 40 to 49 and the 50 plus, which I think kind of contradicts what a lot of people think. So a lot of people would think, well, if you're really good at hitting those 50-yarders, then you must be doing pretty good. And sure, there's a correlation to success with 50-plus yard field goals, but the overall field goal percentage is better. So pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to the 50-plus and the 40 to 49-plus, as much at least. So that's basically that. Same thing goes with yards per punt return, yards per kick return. There's a correlation, but it's a very slight correlation. Touchdowns, the ability to create touchdowns with punt returns and kick returns, slight correlation to wins, but not enough to make you go, oh, okay. Defensively, though, so the ability to prevent punt return yardage, when it comes to winning 12-6 wins, there actually is a slight correlation that favors if you do really well when it comes to preventing punt return yardage, you typically are going to win more football games. It's still only a slight correlation, but it is something that I am going to be putting a bit more stock into overall. And then, of course, the other sort of data when it comes to preventing touchdowns, there's a slight correlation there as well in terms of those sort of things. So for the most part, when it comes to the things that you should know is when it comes to special teams data, the big things that I'm going to be paying attention to and I'm going to be talking to you guys about and emphasizing is field goal percentage, extra point percentage, and maybe sometimes I might talk about if a team is really doing well in terms of preventing punt returns on defense and preventing TDs in terms of their special teams, then I'll pay a little bit more attention. Like, I'll bring this stuff up when I feel it necessary to bring it up, but just keep in mind that the big keys to special teams realistically is just field goal percentage and extra point percentage. So all that other stuff is really noise. I mean, sure, there's a correlation. You don't want to be below average when it comes to these sort of things. But at the same time, it really doesn't matter as much as the other things like offensive scoring and defensive scoring and all the other kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't matter as much as you might think. The old adage that, punting is super important and special teams is super important. It is important. There is a correlation that the teams that typically do better when it comes to special teams win more football games, but it's not as advantageous as you might think, especially when you get into the high-end win range. It really doesn't matter if you're good or bad when it comes to special teams. And we'll dig more into this, when we get into other sort of matchup stuff, but that's just the main thing. Of course, again, all the data is up here, so you can look at that stuff at your leisure. And then the final point I wanted to address is the combination. So when I added the offensive and defensive split scores together, this is basically the averages when it came to 12 to 16 wins, 9 to 11 wins, 8 wins or more, and 7 wins or less. When I added all of the split scores plus the offensive score percentage plus the defensive score percentage, this is where I started to get into the money range. Like, I started to almost get into the getting the scores into the 90 percentile range when it comes to 12 to 16 wins is nutso, but I'm getting close to that. So when it comes to 12 to 16 win teams, those are teams that when they score in split scores plus offensive score percentage plus defensive score percentage, those teams average a score with all those things combined of 87.95 out of 100. Meaning that you better score really well when it comes to this particular metric. This is by far the most predictive metric out of all the metrics. So each week, when I'm doing my matchups, I'm doing all that stuff, and I'm just pointing out different sort of things to pay attention to, especially with individual matchups as well. This is really the whole enchilada metric. This is the one because this is easily the most predictive metric that includes the most predictive data points when it comes to offensive, defensive, and of course, split score data. So this is the whole enchilada when it comes to predicting wins and all that other kind of stuff. So this is definitely something I'm going to be going back to a lot. I don't know what I'm going to call this metric yet, because again, whenever I name things, some of you guys have issues understanding it, but I'm just gonna, again, the whole enchilada metric, I don't know what I'm gonna call it, but again, this is just the metric that again takes into account all the things I was talking about when it comes to offensive score percentage. And it boils down to this, guys. I mean, it's really simple. If you're good at creating points offensively, better than everybody else, you're good on defense at preventing teams from scoring at a good percentage, and you're also pretty good at getting first downs and preventing first downs on defense, you're going to win more football games. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's, like there's obviously other noise and other things to talk about when it comes to individual matchups, and again, we'll get into some more of that stuff when we get to like Super Bowl time and stuff like that, to talk about how the Super Bowl teams matched up when it came to these particular metrics and all that kind of stuff. But as for right now, this is where I'm at. So again, of course, my name is James Coburn. You can find my other work at draftcoburn.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well if anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.